All right, guys. I'm gonna be completely real with y'all in this video. Like, I feel comfortable making the video now than I did, before in the previous months and stuff like that. But I'm gonna tell you guys the real reason why I quit hustling and got my first job at 28. Because let me tell you, like, from the time I graduated college, I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys. Like, I wasn't thinking 2 seconds about getting a job, because to me it just didn't make any sense. Like, and I was doing very well for myself, just being kind of like a street entrepreneur. And like, the thing about it is, like, I'll be completely honest with you, I never made over, let's say, I never made over like $10,000 per month. I came close. I had big goals with what I was doing, but I never made it over $10,000 a month. I think the most I ever made hustling, like month to month, type of thing, on average, I cracked, like, because I remember exactly what it was, because I kept track of every dollar that was coming in. It was something like $8,600 a month. And how I used to look at life is, you can make way more money doing other things, and whatever. You could also, there's millions of ways to make money. But I started really thinking about it, because I was like, if I'm making this much money, there's just no reason to get a job. Like, what? For what reason is there to get a job? But I figured out over time what it was and why I had to just move on to something else. Basically, because when I graduated college in the states down south, like I said, I won't really be specific on where, but I lived in 3 different apartment settings over the span of, like, let's say 3 years after college. So I was in that state, particularly that specific state, for like 8 years total, combining college and my hustling days. And like, I will never forget it. Like I couldn't get an apartment the regular way. I always had to either find a roommate that could show for income, like, because I can't put my income down as, documented income that's legitimate. I couldn't show pay stubs the way people with jobs could. And it's funny, even then, I was okay with that, because I still couldn't stomach the idea of working. And I wanna make the distinction, because I know you guys are thinking, well, like, you getting on the 9 to 5 and stuff like that. It's really not even that. I know that there are good jobs out there, and I always knew that there were good jobs out there that's kind of laid back. You're not really, it's not like a job that causes you much stress. I know there are jobs out there like that, but my biggest fear was, and I knew during the time, this was around like 2020, this was like around 2021. I graduated in 2020. So around 2021, I don't know if you guys remember, the job market was kind of shit back then too, like around 2021. And I knew that. So me, I didn't want to really play a game. I didn't want to really play a failure's game, in a sense, if you could get what I mean. I felt as though I'd be wasting my time applying, because I used to always hear nobody was hiring back then. So I'm like, and then just everything about a job, you got to wait 2 weeks until your check. Like, you there 8 hours a day, all day. And my worst thought was that I'm gonna be working like some warehouse job until I find something else in my degree. I didn't want to have to go through all that. Again, like, I do feel comfortable dropping this video today, so I'm giving it to y'all. Like, I didn't feel comfortable. I felt as though when I pictured a job, I pictured like warehouse, you breaking your back, it's wear and tear on your body, you pretty much like a slave. And you do what you got to do. Like, you do what you got to do. I always had major respect for people that used to do that. But I knew so many people that used to smoke weed. I've said it many times on this channel. That's what I used to, that was my lane. And like, it's like after a certain point, it's like I was building it for a while over the years. And then I had my little motion, my little, customer base. I mentioned it in many other videos. And like, after a certain point, I couldn't go no higher. It's like I was stuck in this loop. I wasn't able to crack over 10,000 a month. It was still pretty lucrative, but then it started getting to the point after like my 3rd apartment, when I moved like my third, I found a little cheap ass place down south. Each apartment I stayed in was no more than like the first apartment I was in was, it started off $800 a month. They increased the rent at that apartment. This was like it was kind of an apartment complex kind of near the beach, but I got lucky with that situation because I knew the guy from college, and he just said, yo, like, you have a roommate, both of y'all pay me $800 each and make it $1,600. I was staying there for a while. It was right kind of, I'm in walking distance of a beach. It was perfect. Then over time, the rent raised to like, it went from 800 to 1,000. Next thing you know, I'm paying 1,000 a month. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I could fade 1,000 a month. Then once it went up again to like 1,300 a month. That's when I started looking to move, because I felt as though I could save more money moving somewhere else. I could pay less money. So the next place I stayed in, it was like, the next place I stayed in was like $725, $750 with Wi-Fi and all the other stuff. The third apartment I stayed in, I think the third apartment I stayed in was like $890, $900 a month, give or take. As long as I could keep the cost within that range, it was doable for me. I didn't need a job. Like, there was no reason for me to get a job. But after the third apartment, I started saying to myself, you know, it would feel really good if I don't really need anybody to co-sign. I don't need anybody. It'd be nice if I could get my own apartment where I could show for pay stubs. I could show them pay stubs and be like, look, I could afford to live here. I make 3 times the income. I can afford this place. And then I'd rather it that way if I could have my own stuff. And I started to realize that, you know, when you getting money under the table, you'll never be able to like live a legit life, if that makes sense. Like, you're always gonna have to be finessing. You're always gonna have to be like coming up. I used to have like a option to make up fake pay stubs to be able to give the apartment complex, say, hey, I work at this fake job, Verizon, wherever it was. I could have pay stubs made and stuff like that. I started exploring other options. I started exploring, I was like, okay, let's see if I could get this shit on my own. I started like looking up how to make a LLC, trying to figure out how to launder the money and stuff. Like, it was just too much. So after a while, like, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I don't think I really mentioned this in other videos. It got to the point where I just said, fuck it, I'm throwing in the towel, like, and I'm gonna just go ahead and get a job. Like, and I'm gonna be real with y'all. My first ever job, this was last year. I worked there for 10 months. I worked at Old Navy. I'm gonna be completely real with y'all. Everything I got on is Old Navy, except for the hat, and the mask, obviously. Everything I got on is Old Navy. Like, everything I got on is Old Navy. If for those of you who don't know, Old Navy is owned by Gap. So, and Gap owns 3 other stores. So Gap owns Athleta, Banana Republic, and Old Navy. All 4 of those stores, Gap, Banana Republic, Old Navy, Athleta, they're all under Gap's umbrella. And I ain't gonna lie, like, you know, when I was applying for jobs and stuff like that, when I first started applying to jobs at the age of 28, I knew I was entering a very hard game of trying to get a job. So, but you know, I thugged it out. I applied to like, I'm gonna be real with y'all, I applied to like 42 jobs. A couple places called me back, but really the only place that called me back and offered me a job was Old Navy at the time. And you know, I was applying everywhere. I was applying to jobs in my career field and stuff like that. But after a while of applying, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to settle for less for a little bit. I'm going to stay down for a little bit. I'm going to get this Old Navy job because they was the one that called me back. And it's not going to be forever. It's just, I'm going to tell you why I was okay with working at Old Navy. I was okay with working at Old Navy because basically what I was using the job for was for a couple things. I looked at the bright side of everything I was doing. For one, I could use this job for references, because when I started applying for jobs, that was a lot of the problems I used to run into. So every time I would apply for a job, they would ask for like 2 or 3 references and stuff like that. I didn't really have any of those. I used to make some up. Like, I used to have some, like, let's say, like, friends of friends, family, like, people I graduated with. I could, like, put them down as a reference, but I wanted it to be more authentic. So, you know, and the story is way more than this. Like, the background story is way more than what I'm telling you, but the point of this video basically is, like, I was using this Old Navy job to set me up for the next step, the job I have now and stuff like that, right? Basically, I was like, okay, the only purpose of this job is for references. And I look at the bright side of working there. I get 50% off discount off all 4 stores, Gap, Banana Republic, Athleta, and Old Navy. I get 50% off all merch. Anytime I want the employee discount, you know, so it was during that time I really started upping my wardrobe and stuff. Every week I was buying something, and like, you could finesse. I used to have a little scheme I would do where it's like, we would have like online exclusive clothing and stuff like that. Every time people would make returns, you know, I would stash those to the side, like something that I would like something that I know I would wear. And I'd be like, okay, OLX used to do like 75% off online exclusive stuff because they wanted to just get rid of it. I used to put those down to the side. So like pants, shirts, sweaters, hoodies, anything you could think of, something that would be worth, like, let's say $75 to $100, I would get that for like $8. I'm not kidding. Like, it'd be like 75% off, and I was able to stack my outfits for like you know, a fraction of the price. So I used to look at the bright side. I was like, okay, I'm gonna use this job. I'm not gonna be working there for long. I ended up working there and staying there for 10 months before I found this current job, which I'll get into in another video. But I looked at the bright side. Everything went according to my plan. I ended up having great managers that I know I could use as a reference. And yeah, I used 2 references from that job to set me up for the next job and stuff like that. Like, I enjoyed working there for the time being, because like, the way I look at life, slow money is better than no money. Like, you know, like, I'd rather, like, I'm not gonna say to myself, I'm not gonna make any money and I'm just not gonna work a job. Like, it's like, nobody wants to, like, let's say, work at McDonald's or just, because like Old Navy and them is basically on the same level. It's like, it's the same type of fucking minimum wage, but you know, I work my max amount of hours. Slow money is better than no money. It gets me set up for the next step, because most jobs basically only like to know that, like, okay, you have a history of working. If you worked at this place for a year, it shows that you have good work ethic and that you're able to keep a job, if that makes sense, even though I wasn't working there that long. But I looked at the bright side. Like, you know, like, it wasn't the worst thing in the world looking back on it. Now, while I was in it, I was kind of like worried that I would be stuck there for a while, but it ended up not being that way. Like, you know, I worked through it. I stayed down, you know, and yeah, like, I'm gonna just tell y'all, like, I don't know, like, over time, I just felt a change was really needed. Like, so I'm gonna wrap this video up, but if you stayed tuned to the end, I'm glad you guys listened. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. I'll see y'all in the next video.